Thank you, all of you, and good morning. I guess I'm Aida Suarez Gonzalez, and as Nikki said before, I'm a clinician and a scientist at UCL. And it is always a privilege for me to be invited to talk in the support groups and share this space with all of you. So thank you all for coming, and also thank you very much to Rare Dementia Support for keep organizing these support groups. If I move away from you can't, yes, I'm Spanish, I have a very high tone of voice, so you can all probably understand what I say, even if I walk away from the microphone. So today I was asked to tell you about and talk about how we can better understand and respond to behaviors that we may find enigmatic or disturbing in the person with dementia. So this is what I will do. Over the next few minutes, I will be talking and trying to shed a bit of light on this couple of questions. Why this behavior is happening and what we can do about it, how we can respond better. And I decided to do this, and this is how we'll be conducting this session, by presenting you with case stories, real-life examples of patients and families that I've seen in clinic that illustrate three main behaviors, three main challenging behaviors that I think present very often and you encounter as families and as supporters, you face very often when dealing with the person with dementia. And I'm talking about these three types of behaviors: forgetfulness and false beliefs, repetitive behaviors, and the person refusing to do things. But before we start with the case stories, I would like to underscore a concept, a notion, which is very important when trying to understand the changes in behavior experienced by the person with dementia. And this notion is that dementia is a brain disease. It is a physical disease of the brain where populations of specialized cells that we call neurons get sick and die. What you are seeing in this slide, in this brain, in different colors, are different parts of the brain that control different cognitive functions. Some parts of the brain are more specialized in language, others in memory, others in attention, others in inhibitory control. But all of them, in an orchestrated way, have a massive influence in controlling and regulating our behavior. And what I'm trying to emphasize by explaining this is that the behavior of the person with dementia is not on purpose. It is most of the time a symptom of the disease or a reaction of the person to these symptoms, an expression of their own grief, frustration, confusion, or fear. And with this, I would like to emphasize that if the behavior of the person is not on purpose, also for them changing their behavior in a voluntary way is extremely challenging. It's not very fair asking them or expecting them to change the behavior that is as a result of a disease, that it is out of their control. So, if we cannot expect the person with dementia to change their behavior, what are we left with? What are our options? So, these are our options. We can learn to change things in the environment or to change our own behavior to respond better to the challenges that we encounter with the person with dementia. What you are seeing in this slide is a decision-making tool to help you decide which one of these two strategies, environment or your own behavior, may be more suitable for your specific context. We'll be using this reasoning system throughout the rest of my talk, okay? All right then, so let's start with the case stories. And let's start by cases of people experiencing forgetfulness and false beliefs. And again, as I said before, these are all real case studies. I didn't make them up for this talk. They are taken directly from families, patients that I treated in clinic, and this has been our learnings working together. Let me introduce you to Mary. So Mary lives with her husband Peter, who has dementia. And every morning, when Mary is finishing her breakfast, Peter comes into the kitchen, and the first thing he sees are the car keys hanging from the keyhole. And then the next thing that happens is that he announces that he's going for a drive. And then Mary reminds him that he no longer drives, he doesn't have a license, and it is not safe for him to drive. Peter doesn't like this. He doesn't know what Mary is talking about. He's always been a very good driver. He's always drives, and he's gonna go out for a drive. What do you think? Of course, this triggers a massive crisis. What do you think, using this reasoning system that I presented before, that Mary can do to respond better to this situation or prevent this situation from happening? Come on.
Fight the case.
Exactly. So there is something very obvious that she can do to modify the environment, and this is exactly what she did. So she maybe removed the keys, put them in a drawer, and replaced them by a kitchen clock. And this reduced significantly the number of times in the morning that Peter will wanted to go for a drive. But we can't always change the environment, right? Yeah. Sometimes we are faced with situations where there is nothing that we can change in the environment. So let me introduce you to our next character, Henry, who, as you can see, has the same interior designer than Mary and Peter. And Henry lives with dementia, with Lewy bodies. And Henry has delusions. Delusions are false beliefs that are very real for the person with dementia, even when there is a strong evidence that they are not true. Henry's most frequent delusion is something that we call Carran's syndrome, and it has to do with his daughter, Claudia. So Henry thinks sometimes that Claudia is not who she says she is. He thinks that Claudia is an imposter. So sometimes he'll look at Claudia and will say, "Where is my daughter?" And Claudia will say, "Dad, I'm your daughter." And who will respond, "No, you are not my daughter. Where is my daughter?" And Claudia will insist and say, "Dad, I'm your daughter. I live here with you." And this will really, it really annoys Henry, and Henry gets angry because he's been challenged in this fundamental belief that how isn't he be able to identify his daughter? Of course that lady is not his daughter. And he gets very angry, and this is very distressing and frustrating for both of them. So in this situation, where there is not much that we can change in the environment because delusions appear often in a very random way, what do you think that Claudia could do to respond better to Henry's behavior? Agree that she is not his daughter. So this is, sorry, there is a bit of lack of configuration in the slide, as you can see. Anyway, this is exactly what Claudia did. So the next time that Henry asked about her daughter, what Claudia decided to do was say, "Oh, she will be coming home soon. But in the meanwhile, while waiting for her, how about you and I go out and do some gardening together?" Henry loves gardening. And what happened when Claudia started using this strategy was that Henry will very happily go out to the garden, engage in this gardening, And while waiting for her daughter to come back home, she will be spending time in this soothing and very pleasant activity with this lovely lady that happened to have the same hobbies than him, and I'm quoting his words. And this didn't eliminate Henry's delusions, but it did neutralize the stress coming from his delusions. Let's have a look now at a different situation, repetitive behaviors. This is Anna, and Anna lives with dementia, and she has a repetitive behavior that she can't refrain. Every time she walks by a candy shop, she wants to get in and buy lots and lots of sweets. And the problem is that there is a candy shop planted halfway between her home and the bus stop. So every day, when coming back from the care center, Anna and her husband pass by the shop, and she wants to come in and buy sweets, and her husband tries to stop her. And she insists, and he tries to stop her even harder, and they have a fight and they have an argument, and it is very unpleasant, and also it is useless because she always manages to get away with it and get into the shop and buy the sweets. So in this situation, can you come up with ideas about things that you might change in the environment or in Anna's husband's behavior that can contribute to create a better situation? I can see some people nodding.
Change the route.
Change the route. So this is what we did in this case. Of course, Anna's husband cannot change the location of the shop, but what they can do is changing the route. They can use the other side of the street to get home. Actually, this strategy didn't work because she was from the opposite side. She was still able to see the shop from the road. So, but actually, but eventually, after trying a couple more of strategies, they decided to use the back street, and that did work and reduced, completely eliminated this strategy in particular. Completely eliminated this candy shop crisis that they were living every day. And this is a good example of how sometimes there are triggers in the environment that we don't have much power on the location of the trigger, but we can remove it from the side of the person, so we can eliminate that trigger. The problem is that sometimes our own behavior is the trigger. And we kind of wear our behavior. So it's much more difficult to remove. Let's have a look at an example where our behavior can be the trigger of a situation. This is Carol. Carol has dementia, and this is Kate, her daughter. It is Monday evening, it is dinner time, and Kate says, "Mom, it is dinner time. How about you lay the table while I prepare dinner?" And Carol responds, "I have dinner when I want to have dinner. You don't tell me when to have dinner. I don't want to have dinner, I'm not going to have dinner." And although they always end up sitting and having dinner together, they do it under a lot of tension, and this is becoming a situation provoking a lot of anxiety in Kate and actually having a negative impact in their relationship. If there is nothing that Kate can change in the environment, is there anything you think that she can change in the way she behaves so she can prevent this from happening or respond better to Carol's behavior?
Ask when she wants to have dinner.
That's an idea, yeah. We could try that. Anyone else?
She could prepare the dinner, leave it on the side and just say, "Mom, dinner is there when you feel like having dinner."
Mm-hmm.
You could just
Like-
heat it up.
Like indicating the context just with an action instead of words. That's another good option.
Can you say that? I'm going to have my dinner now. You want to join?
You can do what you want.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. That's another option. Yeah, this is important. I think they are very valuable contributions, these three, because you are actually removing the intensity of the trigger. You all realize that when Kate says this, that is like a very acute. Yeah.
Asking her to help prepare it.
Yeah. Instead of giving her a task, perhaps we can do this together. That's another very valid option. Very, very good for ideas. I'm going to show you what we did. So Kate decided to do nothing. Just say nothing. The next time that dinner time came, she didn't say a word. If they didn't have dinner that night, they didn't have dinner that night, but she was determined not to pick up a fight. So she didn't say anything when dinner time came, and she waited. And half an hour later, Carol showed up in the kitchen saying, "Darling, it's getting very late, I'm very hungry, shall we start preparing dinner?" This is a true story, and it's a story that I always like to share because I think that it illustrates very well how sometimes the best thing that we can do is nothing. And related to that, I would like to present you the last scenario, which you encounter quite often when you start practicing these strategies, which is when you are in this situation where you strongly feel that there is something that you can do about it, but you don't know what. You don't know how to do it. So there are 3 rules for when you are in that situation. The first one is remember not to fight back. Because it is very easy to forget that dementia is a brain disease. If you challenge the person, you will escalate the conflict, you are not going to get anything good. It's a much better option to let it be. For the time being, you are not surrendering. You are just making a pause. And you are taking it away and giving yourself space to think about it when you are well rested and you can think straight, and perhaps you had time to discuss a potential strategy with friends or family. And then you have that strategy in your pocket for the next time that the situation comes up. But it is very important here is to understand that we should not react to behaviors. We should respond strategically to behaviors. And there is a massive difference here. And this is the end of my talk, and this is your decision-making tool and your takeaway message from today, which is remembering that the behavior of the person is not on purpose, and you need to develop this ability to use effectively strategies that is. These strategies are not about humoring the person, it's about building bridges with the person. It's about you learning to speak in a different language. So thank you very much for your attention. I think that perhaps there is a bit of time for questions and interaction before I tell them about the study.
Pretty sure. Thanks so much, Aida. Just so helpful. And just to say, this is not in any way to disagree with anything you've said, quite the reverse. But that we all know, and this is a space where you can be open and clear, particularly this afternoon, that there will be times when you're not able to follow those strategies. And you shout out, or you scream, or you totally lose it. And I suspect everyone's been in that position. I'm sure we both have too. And so we will be trying this afternoon, trying to look at these, kind of workshopping these constructive scenarios, but also this is a safe space to say that sometimes when the creativity breaks down and the patience goes, this is a space where it's okay to say that to you. Questions for Aida? I think
it's with the Henry and the Claudia scenario. So what would happen then if Henry wasn't amenable? So when she said, daughter's going back, child's going to the garden, but actually he was very distressed by her being in the house because he didn't recognise her and she's an intruder. Yeah. So could you just elaborate a bit more if that was the scenario?
Can
Yes,
you repeat the question? I didn't hear.
Sorry, should I say? Yeah.
Or do you want to?
I can probably. So she's asking what will happen in Henry's scenario if if the strategy didn't work and Henry felt very distressed about having Claudia at home and didn't want to go gardening with her. And this is a very common situation actually. Also because when families start using these strategies, the level of tension is usually already very high because they've tried many other things that didn't work and there is already this very tense relationship. So, but I'm going to ask you the same question back. Based on what we've been discussing, what do you think? Because I don't have magic responses. I can always tell you what has worked in clinic for different people and more or less what's the reasoning system. But if you don't know what to do, if that doesn't work and you don't know what to do, it's better to do nothing, let it be. Because a very important thing is to de-escalate tension and see what else you can try. For instance, for an example, something that many families realize when they take some distance is that there are some other triggers in the environment that make things difficult. So for instance, some families identify that when the sun starts coming down, it is a moment of massive distress. And they all need to kind of back up and let the person have, they can't stop it. There is a moment of high stress, there is a down-sounding phenomenon that occurs in dementia, and this sometimes triggers delusions. And there is nothing that you can do except perhaps backing off and letting the person have this moment or reorganize the routines at home. So this sometimes happens, and it is very common that the strategies do not work for everybody. And not all delusions are the same intensity. Sometimes they are very strong and create for instance, this delusion, this caregiver's delusion, can be accompanied with delusions of theft or harm. The person thinking at the same time that it's going to be attacked, someone wants to harm him. And of course this creates a lot of distress. But the best thing when you don't know what to do is to escalate tension and agree with whatever is happening.
Thanks so much. Great question. Great answer. I remember also you telling us once about a similar kind of situation, and you were saying that kind of reading the room is key, kind of figuring out, am I being asked a question or am I being told something? So if someone says, who are you? That's the opportunity to step in with information and try to sort of go thing. Whereas if someone says, you're not my daughter, or whatever, that might be the time to sort of step out of the room, perhaps solve the delusion, de-escalates a little bit, and then you might get a different reaction when you come back. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I know what you mean. So sometimes the person may ask you, who are you? And if you identify yourself, then the person, because sometimes this question may be because of a delusion, some other times can be just confusion. So the person may ask you, who are you? And you say, I'm your daughter. Oh, right, my daughter, and everything may be fine. And then that strategy works. But if the person challenges you, you say, I'm your daughter. No, you are not. Do not insist. Then that's the moment to use a different strategy and accommodate to the reality that the person is experiencing at that moment, because it's very strong, it's very real.
Very quickly, it's not actually a question, it's just a comment. I mean, I'm a great believer in strategies and finding solutions to problems practically. But I think as the person living with the one with dementia, the trickiest thing is controlling your emotions at the moment. Not because you can't control your emotions as such, but because you are dealing with something that your partner in front of you. If I kind of agree that, use a strategy, am I surrendering his agency and his capacity at this moment? And I'm saying, actually, that's it, Valley, you have to accept that we are where we are, and he can't do that, and you have to deal with him in that way. I think this is the hardest one for me, surrendering and actually accepting that you're going into a different stage.
Thank you very much, because that is extremely important, what you just said. And the reason why we clinicians fail sometimes in implementing this strategy is never the families that fail, it's you, the clinician instructing the families failing to implement the strategies is because families are resistant to use them because of that reason. Because they are not ready, or they need more time to accept that that is the new language at home. Because what families feel is that they are losing the person, there is a distance. When you use those strategies, it's like humoring the person. It's like building a wall of communication. What happens long term is that you are creating a new relationship with the person. And the more you use the strategies and the more you neutralize tension, the closer you are to the person. But it's learning this new language, which is a massive challenge and something very complicated to learn that takes time and practice. So these are things that you can only learn with practice. And sometimes Seb and I were actually talking about this and chatting about this a bit earlier today, that it is a paradox, but some people, when you are diagnosed with the condition, it's very difficult to infuse hope in people because the situation is so difficult, the conflicts are so heated, so distressing. It's very difficult to convince people or to inject hope by saying that perhaps 3 years or 4 years down the line, life will be better. No one believes that. But actually, when in some cases, not for everybody, when you start entering into a routine of using strategies and learning better about how to manage your situation, of course you continue having challenges, but there are some things that without you even realizing have improved massively. And behavioral management is one of the things that families learn to do very well. And they still come to clinic and say, no, there is all this bad, because they don't realize how skilled they are at all these strategies and abilities that they didn't have 3 years before. Because of course you are always facing challenges, so the only thing you see is the new challenge. But you accumulate a massive amount of experience and abilities over time, and that only brings you closer to the person. It's not surrendering, it's choosing your battles. Yeah, half and half, agree.
Okay, time for one more question before I get the introducers back.
Hi, thank you. It's kind of in 2 parts. One, I don't really understand you mentioned triggers, so it's a visual trigger, which is the kind of keys, for example, on the wall, the car keys. But then you mentioned sundowning. I don't really know what that is. And then my real question is, are there any kind of triggers that we can kind of look for that cause that, whether it's kind of refusal or repetition or kind of challenging situations, aside from sundowning, whatever that is, and car keys?
Yeah, thank you very much. So this thing about triggers, we could spend a whole morning talking about triggers. Triggers are complex, and you learn how to identify them by paying attention to them. So this resonance system today is very basic and simplistic, but it doesn't make sense that I come with a complex system for you today. So at least a couple of very basic clear ideas for you to take away today. But when it comes to triggers, often we use a tool called, when we want to train families to identify triggers, we use a tool called behavioral records that helps you identify the behavior and what happens right before the behavior started. So you don't need to elaborate complicated theories about why this thing and this. You just need to identify what happened and what happens. And sometimes it is that this person came in the home, or that this object was visible, the keys, or this particular event in the day, the sundowning. And these are things that you learn to identify when you keep a record and you make observations with awareness, with the purpose of identifying triggers. And sometimes families think that triggers are random, that behavior is random. Some behavior is random, but other behaviors follow a pattern. And there are lots of triggers during the day that may produce situations. But you need to use the tool. Some people just take notes. They just take a note about when this behavior happened and what you were doing right before the behavior appeared. So for instance, in the case of Kate and Carol, this behavior was very clear. So when I asked Kate to start taking notes about when this challenging behavior will show up, it became after the first week of her taking her notes. It became very apparent for her. I didn't need to tell her anything, that it was that sentence of, "Mom, dinner time, let's do this." And Carol hated that sentence. That sentence was like a terrible thing for her to hear. And it was probably because, well, you never know the reason, this is a speculation, but she didn't like it. She didn't like that someone was telling her what to do. Perhaps because she was losing so much control in her life that the last thing she wanted to hear was someone, her daughter, telling her, it's dinner time. But what you can do to identify the triggers is learning to use these tools. There is a lot of information in the internet about how to complete behavioral reports, and we have recordings in our website of a session that I ran 2 or 3 years ago, explaining how to do in a very simple way a behavioral report. So if you are interested, you can watch it, and you will learn how to identify triggers.
Sorry, could you just, so the Sundowning thing, is that a kind of diurnal kind of body clock, or is that actually physically seeing it go from light to dark, or what, you know?
So it's a particular sensitivity that people with dementia have when the sun is gone, in the afternoon. So for instance, in care homes, they are very familiar with this phenomenon because people get the whole care home gets a lot, very agitated, and neuropsychiatric symptoms are more frequent in that moment because people with dementia, because of biological reasons, become more sensitive to this time in the day.
But is it the darkness, or is it just, or is it?
Oh no, it's not only the darkness. So for instance, if they walk into a dark room in the morning in a museum or something like that, it's linked to the biological, yes. Oh, sorry, don't know about this. Very good. And one last thing before I finish. So we are conducting a study, and we are testing a new web-based caregiver educational program. And this is done by RBS, by the RBS team. And we call this educational program the Better Living with Non-Memory-Led Dementia. And at the moment, we are running it for carers, supporters, and families of people with PPA, PCA, and FTD. So this is a brief educational course that was co-designed with 22 people with lived experience, with people like you, and the RBS team. And this is how it looks like. So it is basic information about these 2 different phenotypes, and it consists of 6 chapters, giving you basic information about the disease, tips to support the person living with dementia, some more tips for you to manage better in daily life, and some more information about sources of support and the value of support groups. And what we are trying to do with this intervention is to understand whether this provision of information has a positive impact in your daily life, living with the person with dementia, providing support, and managing life in general. So we are asking participants, so people who sign up for this study, we are asking them to fill in some questionnaires with questions about how you are managing in daily life, what's their relationship with the person with dementia. Then we are asking you to interact with this educational program, which is all online, over a few weeks, and then we are asking you the same questions again, administering the same questionnaires to see if being exposed to this information makes any change in your life. We are aiming to recruit 238 carers towards the end of the study. And something I would like to clarify is that half these people will be given access immediately to the educational program, and the other half will be put on a wait list. So we can compare the performance between people who received the educational intervention and people who didn't. But those who didn't, who were put in the wait list, will be given access as well to the educational program once we finish the study, which for them is 6 months later. And if you are interested in taking part, please get in touch with Harvest. And thank you very much.